Tonight we explore a simple tragedy. You're hungry, you're tired, and somewhere across the fire, Viking is using your spoon like it was always his. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment with your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. It began at dusk, that soft blue hour when the sea mists roll in and the campfires crackle to life, and even the hard men of the north loosen their furs and grunt a little less. You'd been traveling for days, boots full of mud, hair full of salt, stomach mostly full of nothing, and finally, after enough coin, favors, and awkward nods, you earned a place near the fire. You weren't expecting comfort, but you were expecting to eat. You had a spoon. A good spoon. Not silver, but honest wood, smoothed from years of soup and travel and all the meals that blurred between. It fit in your palm like it belonged there. It was yours. And that's important, because now it's his. The Viking doesn't even glance at you. He just dips your spoon into a pot of something stewing, fishy, thick, maybe even edible, and raises it to his mouth like the world owes him dinner and your dignity. He chews loudly. He smacks his lips. He grins. And your spoon disappears into his beard. You don't say anything, because no one says anything to a Viking with that many axes and that few manners. But inside, you begin to unravel. You try to remember what the rules are, what little scraps of etiquette you've picked up from border towns, ships, and terrified monks. Is spoon theft a challenge? An insult? A courtship? Unclear. You look around. There are 9 others seated in the fire circle. 4 Vikings. Loud, broad, confident in the way only people with war stories and back hair can be. 3 traders watching, silent, pretending not to notice the cutlery crisis. 1 monk nibbling something from a flat rock and whispering to the fire. And you, spoonless, hungry, and completely unsure of your next move. You think maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he thought it was communal. Maybe your spoon simply wandered. You consider reaching for it gently, waiting for a moment when the Viking turns his back. But then you remember, he never turns his back. Not on food, not on spoons, not on threats. He finishes the stew, licks the spoon slowly, and tucks it into his boot. You feel this deeply? Like a betrayal, like a heartbreak, like a man just kidnapped your only child, except the child is carved wood and emotionally irreplaceable. You shift slightly on your log. Someone notices. The monk, perhaps. He coughs. Ben mutters. He did the same to Brother Odric, took his knife and called it shad steel. Odric still fast. You nod solemnly. Another spoon casualty. You weigh your options. You could demand it back. Rusty. You could appeal to honor. Pointless. You could weep gently and hope to shame him into returning it. Doubtful. You decide on watching, learning, waiting for the moment when a spoon, once taken, might be re-earned. Dinner ends. The pot is scraped. The air smells like burned fish and boiled onion. The Vikings lean back, stretch, belch with pride. One of them stands, lifts a horn of ale, and begins a song that is mostly grunts and the word blood repeated in varied tones. The others join in. You sit still, very still. like a squirrel that's seen too many arrows. Eventually, the fire dims. The monk retreats into a blanket of wool and repentance. The traders whisper about silver. The Vikings roll into furs and snore like thunder beneath wet hides. And the spoon? Still in the boot, left side, a handle up. You stare at it. You imagine slipping it out like a thief. You imagine reclaiming your dignity in one quiet motion. You imagine breakfast, but you don't move. Not yet, not tonight. Because tonight, you're learning something strange. In Viking camps, spoons aren't just tools. They're territory. You lie back on the cold ground. You pull your cloak tight. You listen to the crackle of dying fire and the occasional Viking fart. And you whisper to yourself, "Tomorrow, I will get my spoon back." Maybe. If the gods are bored enough to intervene. Or if breakfast is stew again. Or if you dream of a world where spoons are sacred and Vikings don't steal what's not offered. The Viking still has your spoon. You confirm this the moment the sun rolls over the misty edge of the fjord and into the camp like an uninvited guest. The boot, left side, still bulges with your wooden relic, tucked in as if it's always belonged there. He sleeps with one arm behind his head, smiling, probably dreaming of more spoon theft. Maybe soap. You haven't slept much. Too cold. Too anxious. Too spoonless. But more than that, you've been strategizing, because the spoon isn't just an object. It's a symbol, a declaration of social standing, a test of your courage and your capacity to retrieve what is yours without losing your dignity or your fingers. The camp begins to stir. One Viking rolls over and groans. Another sits up and immediately scratches something that probably shouldn't be scratched in public. The monk is already awake, humming a hymn that sounds like an apology. You sit up slowly. You stretch. You breathe. You try to look like someone who's not planning spoon vengeance. The stew pot from last night sits in the ashes, crusty, blackened, empty. But beside it, a new pot. Steam rising, scent, oat, fish, and possibly regret. Breakfast. You're both excited and terrified, because breakfast means spoons. And you, at this moment, are spoonless. In Scandinavia, the ladle dips, porridge is served. Each man approaches the pot with his own eating tool, a wooden spoon, a bent copper ladle, a chipped horn with dubious cleanliness. And then him, your Viking, he saunters to the pot. He squats, and from his boot he pulls your spoon. He inspects it, like he's admiring his own reflection in the grain of the wood. Then, and this is crucial, he bites the edge, not hard, just enough to leave a mark. You flinch. Inside, the quiet lid. On the outside, you nod politely, like someone who approves of dental impressions on personal property. Loudly, sloppily, with a rhythm that suggests dominance. You wait. You let him finish. You don't stare. But you do count. 8 spoonfuls. A grunt. 3 more. Then, with a final flourish, he wipes it on his sleeve and drops it onto a rock. This is your chance. You approach the pot, slowly, casually, like someone with a perfectly normal amount of cutlery confidence. You don't look at the spoon. You just stand near it. You scoop your portion using the ladle. You walk back toward your sitting log, and then, with the grace of a practiced liar, you crouch near the rock and scoop it up. Your spoon, lightly bitten, mildly desecrated, but yours. You hold it like a relic, like a baby bird, or a letter from a friend, or a key to the past, and then you hear it, a grunt. You look up, he's staring at you, not angry, just amused. He tilts his head and says in rough, common tongue, "Good spoon." You nod, reply, "Great spoon." He chuckles, a deep, low thing that vibrates the moss. Then, and this is critical, he raises his hands, palms out, and says, "Yours. I borrow." You exhale. It was never theft, not to him, just a Viking alone. You sit, you eat, you chew in silence, you ignore the tooth dent in the rim. The stew is good, warm, salty, familiar, and as you reach the bottom of your bowl, you feel something else, not just fullness, but acceptance, because in this moment, this weird little ritual of borrowed spoons and mutual acknowledgement, you've been acknowledged, not as a threat, not as a guest, but as part of the fire circle. Later, the Viking stands, stretches, scratches again, then tosses something toward you. You catch it. A second spoon, too thick, too new, unfinished, but it's his. He nods once. You nod back, and just like that, you're even. 2 spoons, 1 understanding, 0 enemies. You tuck yours into your belt, secure, you safe, sanctified by fish. And as the wind picks up and the camp begins to pack, you realize you didn't lose a spoon. You gained a rule. Among Vikings, property is temporary, but mutual nodding, eternal. You now possess 2 spoons, 1 bitten, slightly singed, yours by origin, 1 thick, overcarved, gifted by a Viking who grunts more than he speaks. Together they clack against each other at your belt like unlikely friends, like twin tokens from opposite lives. You walk a little differently now, not because you're stronger or older, but because for the first time in this journey, you've survived a Viking breakfast without losing anything permanently. And in the 9th century, that's practically nobility. The day is long. The group travels inland, past moss-covered stones, past trees shaped like question marks, past streams so cold they seem to insult your ankles. You don't speak much. None of you do. Vikings don't chat. They grunt. They nod. They occasionally break into song about axes or fish, but only when drunk or victorious. You are neither. So you walk in spooned silence. Round midday a stop is made. The sun is too hot. Even the Vikings remove a layer. One produces a flask of something strong and cough-worthy. Another begins cleaning a weapon that does not need cleaning. You sit under a tree and unwrap a hunk of bread you traded for yesterday. Dry, dense, not quite stone. You take a bite. It takes a moment to chew, possibly a year. Then he sits beside you, your spoon thief turned benefactor. He doesn't speak, just points at the bread. You offer him half. He accepts it, doesn't thank you, just chews, and nods, which in Viking is a sonnet. He reaches into his satchel, pulls out a pouch. From it, salted fish strips. He tears one, gives it to you. It's briny. Oh, but honest. You chew in rhythm. Red. Red again. No cutlery. No ceremony. Just salt and silence and two people who now share a language made entirely of food and gesture. After the meal, he grunts. Points to your spoon, the original one. Name? You blink. You want to know my name? He shakes his head. No. Spoon name? You stare. You laugh once, then realize he's not joking. In this culture, it seems, important objects deserve names. You think for a moment, and say, birch bite. He grins, points at his own. Thunk. You nod solemnly, as if this is a deeply spiritual moment. And in a way it is. 2 spoons, 2 names, 2 people now bound by porridge and oak and slightly ridiculous reverence. That evening you reach a village, not large, not poor, a place where the houses lean slightly, as if listening for news from the sea. The locals are cautious. They've seen Viking travelers before. They prefer them brief, but one of the elders recognizes your companion and nods. A fire is lit, food is shared. You're handed a bowl, and for the first time in days, no one questions your presence. You eat slowly, respectfully. You use birch bite. Your Viking uses thunk, and between bites, you exchange the only dialogue that truly matters here. A glance, a chew, a nod, and once, just once. The village is quiet after dinner. Not silent. There's always a cough, a distant chicken, the creak of something wooden that shouldn't be creaking. But there's a kind of peace here. The kind you only get when no one expects anything from you. You've earned your place, not with words or coin, but with behavior. You didn't eat too quickly. You didn't reach across someone else's bowl. You didn't drop your spoon. That last one is more important than it sounds. You sit near the hearth with the others. Your Viking companion sharpens a blade that doesn't need sharpening. You polish birch bite with a bit of cloth, not for function, but for the ceremony of it. Across the fire, a woman is slicing something, root vegetable or possibly candle. She hums softly. You feel, strangely, at home. Then someone asks, "What kind of guest are you?" It's not hostile, just curious. You pause, think, say, the kind who learns the rules too late but obeys them forever. They nod. That's a good answer. A child approaches, hair like straw, eyes like moss, holding a bowl far too big for their hands. They stop in front of you, extend it. No words, just the bowl. You glance inside. It's soup, barely. Thin, beige, suspiciously quiet. You look around. No one else moves. This is a test. You reach for your spoon. Birch bite. You stir gently, once clockwise, once counter. Then sip, not slurp, not chug. Just sip. It tastes like boiled decisions. You smile. You nod. You say. The child beams, then runs off. Test passed. Zoop survived. That night, you sleep in a barn. A wool blanket, A goat that eyes you like it knows your secrets. You dream of spoons, of names, of stew that never ends, and of hands reaching toward bowls, always careful, always quiet. Morning brings rain, not loud, a steady whisper, the kind of rain that makes every roof feel like a shield. The fire is already lit. Breakfast is barley and regret. You eat slowly. Thunk and Birchbite take turns. You clean them both with reverence. Someone chuckles. You treat your spoon like a relic. You shrug. Maybe it is. They don't laugh. They nod because they understand. Before leaving, the village elder hands you something. E-cloth, wrapped tight. Inside, a new spoon. Smaller, lighter, carved with tiny waves along the handle. A travel spoon. You bow deeply. No words. Too much might ruin the moment. You tuck it beside the others. Now you have 3. You're becoming something dangerous. A person with options. As you walk out of the village, your Viking friend speaks. Rare. Simple. Next place. Big feast. You look over. You invited? He shrugs. Doesn't matter. You grin and walk. Spoons at your side, ready for whatever etiquette war comes next. The feast is 3 days away. You know this because every time you stop at a new village, a trader, a cook, or a curious goat mentions it in the same hushed, reverent tone. The great summer table. It happens once a year, on high ground, at the edge of 2 rivers that never learned how to agree on direction. It's not just food. It's a test, a challenge, a memory that lasts longer than most marriages. Your Viking calls it the loud one, which, coming from a man who once used a fish spine as a toothpick without blinking, is ominous. You're not sure what to expect, but you're preparing, practicing. Each night, you sit by the fire and test your spoons. 1 for soup, 1 for stew, 1 for what your companion calls uncertain mush. You rotate them like soldiers on watch. Day 1 of travel is calm. You pass through meadows. You trade a joke for an apple. You eat said apple with your travel spoon. The weight is perfect. The bowl shallow. The handle curves like it knows what hands have been through. You feel ready. Day 2 brings rain. Not romantic rain. The angry kind that makes trees argue and paths vanish. You slip twice. Land in mud once. Your Viking laughs loudly, with joy. You pretend not to mind. You both sleep beneath a cot someone forgot. You count your spoons before bed. Still 3. Still dry. Day 3, the river appears. Fast. Loud. Smelling faintly of fish and secrets. Crossed it. The feast site. Smoke already curling into the sky. Voices. The thump of preparation. And above it all, a sound you recognize with instant dread. Spoon clinks. We've begun. You cross on a plank bridge. Wobbly, greasy, charmed, allegedly. You clutch your satchel of spoons like it contains relics. Which, to you, it does. At the far side, you're greeted by a man with too many teeth. He says, "What did you bring?" You answer, 3 spoons. He grins. He nods, points you forward. But apparently that's enough. The camp is vast. Tents, tables, pots the size of dreams, and people, dozens of them from 5 villages you've never heard of and 2 you swore were fictional. Each carries their own utensil, some metal, some carved. One man has a spoon with what appears to be a gemstone in the handle. Show off. You feel nervous, and then your Viking claps your back, says, "Eat or be remembered." You're placed at a table with strangers, not hostile, just unfamiliar. They glance at your satchel. You zip it slowly, reveal birch bite. They nod. You place thunk beside it. A few brows lift. You lift the travel spoon. Someone whistles, low and impressed. You're in. The first course is served. Fish soup. With bits. Bits of what? Unclear. Possibly history. You use birch bite. Carefully. Clockwise stir. Scoop. Sip. And again. No slurping. No dribbling. You survive. Course 1 complete. Second course is barley mush with roasted root. A challenge in texture. You select thunk. The bowl is wide enough. The edge just dull enough. You carve the mush. Scoop the root. Chew slowly. Someone across the table burps. You wait. 2 beats. Then burp softer. The correct response. They nod. You nod. Thunk returns to its place of honor. Third course. Sweet porridge. Golden. Almost cheerful. You reach for the travel spoon. Someone watches. You eat. Not fast. Not slow. Just balanced. They smile and offer you more. You decline gracefully. Now you're not just surviving. You're performing. By the time dessert arrives, a date baked into honey crust, you are no longer nervous. You're spooned confidence. You bite. You smile. You breathe. And you realize something. The Viking who took your spoon gave you a skill. And now, you're not the guest. You're not the stranger. You are one of them. Person of the feast. A wielder of spoons. A survivor of the great summer table. That night the fire is high. Not ceremonial, chaotic. Too much mead. Too many elbows. One song that began about goats and has now spiraled into a love ballad for onions. You sit slightly outside the main circle. Content. You cradle your spoons like medals after a long war. Birch bite warm from soup. Thunk, polished by root mush. The travel spoon, still faintly sweet from dessert. Each has earned its place. Each has told a story. And you're no longer the traveler who didn't know the rules. You're the one others now ask. It happens casually. A boy, maybe 10, maybe just short, walks over, sits beside you, holds up a misshapen scoop carved from what might have been a ladle. He says quietly, "Is this good?" You take it, turn it, weigh it. Too heavy. Poor balance. Handle shaped like a confused eel. But it's honest. And used. You nod. Good for thick stews. Not for anything fast. He beams. Runs off like you just knighted him with oatmeal. You sip something spiced. You don't ask what's in it. By now, you know the rule. If it's hot and doesn't bubble green, drink it. The Viking finds you. Thunk's original owner. He sits, grunts, nods toward the fire, and then says, "You spoon well." You blink. "Thank you," he clarifies. "You know when to eat, when to wait, when to stir, when to stop." You nod. It's the highest praise you'll ever receive from someone who once ate eel with his fingers and didn't flinch. He holds out a small bundle, wrapped in cloth, tied with hair. Very Viking. Inside, a fourth spoon. Short, flat, bone-handled, he says. "Trade. From a monk I liked." You stare. "Liked?" He shrugs. "He's dead. But not because of me." You accept the gift, quietly. Place it next to the others. The weight changes. Now you're carrying a set. People begin to drift to sleep. In clusters. Snoring. Sighing. Muttering names in dreams you're glad not to witness. You lie down near the embers. Spoons tucked close. Boots off. And as the sky shifts to its darker ink, you realize you've become something rare. A person who understands the rhythm of a meal not because of rules, but because of listening. Sleep takes you gently. Your last thought, you're no longer the one who had a spoon stolen. You're the one who might someday give one away. The morning after the feast smells like ash and regret. The fire is low. The stew pot is empty, save for one unfortunate beet slice clinging to the side. A goat has wandered into someone's cloak. A man is sleeping face down in a plate. You're awake, holding your spoons, counting them like blessings. Or now, birch bite, travel spoon, monk bone, each one tied to a moment, each one telling you, you were here, you ate, you weren't a disgrace. You stretch, you stand, you scan the camp, a sea of gently snoring failure, except for one figure, moving among the scattered sleepers, light-footed, quick, too quiet. They stop near a slumped trader, bend, each, slip something into a pouch, into the next, into the next. They're not looting, they're collecting spoons. You blink. Is this a dream? Has your obsession turned into visions? You squint. No, this is real. There is a spoon thief in the land of spoon reverence. You rise silently, approach without sound. The figure is wrapped in a gray cloak, thin, precise movements, like a shadow with a to-do list. You step on a twig. The thief freezes, spins, eyes wide. Not a Viking, not a monk, not even a particularly bold goat. A girl, young, holding a pouch that clinks. Cheek bolts. You chase, half asleep, full of barley, fueled entirely by spoon justice. She's fast but burdened. Too many spoons, too many trophies. You cut a corner, catch her near the edge of the woods. She stops, panting, holds out her pouch, says, "I wasn't going to keep them." You raise an eyebrow. She adds, "Just organize them." You blink. Organize? She nods. Everyone here eats like barbarians. Some spoons are better for fish, some for broth. No one's keeping track. I was going to label them, return them, educate them. You stare. This is not a thief. This is a lunatic librarian. And yet, you understand her too well. You sit, You ask her name. She says, Nara. You show her yours, Birchbite. She whistles. Respect. You open your satchel. Lay out your four. She lays out hers. 8 tools, all stolen, all sorted by size. Some chipped, some ancient, one carved with what looks like a duck. She says, this one belonged to a king. You say, it smells like turnip. You talk for a long time about spoons, about texture, about edge curve, about ideal porridge viscosity ratios. She listens, nods, takes notes on bark with coal. You found something rare, not just a kindred spirit, but a spoon scholar. You strike a deal. You'll help her return the ones she took, properly. You'll help her teach others what spoons are for, not just from. She agrees. She hands you one, a small cracked thing made of pine. Your teaching spoon, she says. You accept. Gently. Now 5. Back at camp, the waking begins. Groans, stretches, questions like, where's my spoon? Asked in 5 dialects. You and Nara work quickly, like saints or well-meaning thieves. Each spoon is returned with a quiet explanation. Too shallow for stew. Try thicker broth. This one's from the monk pile. Not meant for meat. People grumble. Then nod. Then try again. No one punishes her. Some thank her. A few ask for pointers. One man offers her a goat in exchange for a consultation. She declines. You're proud. At evening you sit beside the embers, your spoons beside hers. 11 total, 2 lives, 2 paths, 1 mission, to honor the spoon and to make sure no one ever uses a dessert ladle for fish again. That night something changes. Not outside. The fire still crackles, the mead still stinks, and someone nearby is still snoring in E-flat. But inside you, in the quiet space between your ribs and your rice-sized dinner, there's a new awareness. You are no longer just a survivor of spoon politics. You are now a spoon ambassador. You and Nara become a quiet force. By dawn, a makeshift bench becomes your consultation station. One person arrives with a warped ladle, another with a ceremonial taster's stick from the coast, beautiful but impossible to stir with. You advise gently. Nara takes notes. A child hands you a twig with a dent. You hand it back with solemn gravity and say, perfect for goat yogurt. They beamed. Word spreads. Someone calls you spoon whisperers. Another tries cutlery shamans. You settle on keepers of the hollow bowl. It's ridiculous. You love it. The Viking returns around mid-morning. Funk at his side, an onion in his hand, and a glint in his eye that suggests he just won something, or someone. He sees your display. He stops, grunts, and sits beside you. He holds out Thunk and says, still best. You nod, but gently show him one of Nara's finds, a long-handled deep scooper from the southern rivers, ideal for stew extraction at awkward pot angles. He holds it, feels the balance, grunts louder. Second best. A trader with wine breath arrives next. He slams down a ladle so large it might double as a helmet. He stares. He says proudly, family heirloom. You ask, for what kind of food? He shrugs. Whatever fits. Nara delicately takes it and suggests, perhaps ceremonial use only? He looks offended, then thoughtful, then wanders off, muttering about gruel occasions. By midday you've seen 20 spoons. Some carved, some bent, one made of bone and clearly cursed. You don't touch that one. You just bow to it, respectfully. A young woman arrives with a carved birch spoon shaped like a bird. It's so thin it might snap from looking at soup too hard. She asks, "Is it usable?" You say only if the meal is polite. She grins, places it back in her pouch like treasure. It probably is. Not everyone understands. A warrior spits and says, "Eat with hands. Faster." You nod. Some do, but hands can't scoop broth, and they rarely fit gracefully in communal pots. He grunts, doesn't argue. That's a win. Late afternoon brings a gift. Boy, shy, limping slightly, hands you something wrapped in linen. You open it. Inside, a spoon made of stone, polished smooth, heavy, rounded like a river pebble. It's beautiful. Useless, but beautiful. He says nothing, just looks at you with the kind of eyes that ask permission without sound. You hold it, you nod. This is for slow meals. Meals with meaning. He nods back, walks away, still limping, still proud. As dusk falls, the camp begins to cook again. Bigger fires, more pots. This time, more spoons and better choices. People stir smarter, scoop quieter, chew with something like reverence. You and Nara sit with empty bowls, giant, content. Your satchel now holds 6 spoons. Nara's 10, each with a store, each with a purpose. You've become more than guests. You've become a ritual. Before sleep, the Viking claps your back, says, "Tomorrow we carve." You raise an eyebrow. He adds, "Your turn to make one." You nod, because you know you're ready. Morning smells like sap and sawdust. The fires haven't been lit yet, but someone's already boiling bark for tea, and someone else is arguing gently with a block of wood. You stretch, you rise, and you find your Viking already seated on a tree stump, knife in hand, shaping something that looks suspiciously like a handle. He grunts as you approach. You carved today. You sit beside him. He tosses you a piece of wood, smooth birch, knotless, palm-sized. It smells clean. You look at it, you breathe, and you begin. Spoon carving isn't glamorous. There's no applause, just shaving, scraping, rotating, reconsidering, shaving again. You nick your thumb twice. You sigh more than you should. Your Viking says nothing, just watches, then eventually says, "Too thin, it'll snap in soup." You nod. Keep going. Nara appears. She has a toolkit, more precise than yours, more loved than most people. She sits cross-legged and starts carving too. Her spoon has a spiral handle and a bowl shaped like a teardrop. Yours looks confused, but it's yours, and it's learning. By mid-morning, you've shaped a bowl, uneven, lopsided, but deep enough to hold something, thunk-worthy even. The Viking inspects it, sniffs, grunts, ugly. You wait. He adds, but honest. You smile. That might be a compliment. You burn your mark into the handle, a small wave etched with a hot iron. Not flashy, just yours. Now 7 spoons in the satchel. 6 earned, 1 made. Each a small memory you can hold in your hand. The rest of the day is spent quietly. Spoons are tested in broth. Nara helps a baker redesign his gravy shovel. You teach a goat herder how to hold a flat spoon sideways for better pea collection. The Viking spends 2 hours teaching a child to stir stew without touching the bottom of the pot. When the child succeeds, he nods. Solemn, almost proud, then steals their turnip. Balance restored. Evening falls. Dinner is bread soaked in lentil soup. Everyone uses their own spoon now. No grabbing, no borrowing, no mysteries. The clinks are softer, respectful. This is new. This is better. Afterward, there's a ceremony. No official announcement, it just begins. People gather around the fire. One by one, they hold out their spoon and say its name. Quietly, some names are silly, Slurperton. Some are reverent, Bonebelly, the gift. Yours? You hold out the new one, crooked, rough, a bit too wide. You say, "This is Emberball," and someone across the circle claps once. Then everyone else follows, softly, not for you, for the spoon. You fall asleep that night with Ember Bowl tucked in your hand, and you dream of soup and fire and 100 spoons swirling together in a great iron pot, each one different, each one sacred, each one earned. You wake to rain on canvas, a soft, uncertain drizzle, the kind that forgets it started, then remembers halfway through breakfast. You sit up slowly, spoon still in your satchel, and Ember Bowl still warm from where it slept in your hand. No one speaks yet. The camp is quiet in that fragile way it only gets when people have shared food, fire, and something like vulnerability. Even the goats are silent. You stretch. You nod to the Viking. He nods back, already chewing something that crunches suspiciously in the morning gloom. You and Nara meet near the fire pit. She's already sketching, a spoon with a handle that forks like a tree branch, and a bowl shaped like a seashell. Too ambitious, she asks. You shrug. Just enough. She grins. You both sit, and you realize something. For the first time in this long, strange journey, no one is watching you. No one is testing your grip, or judging your scoop, or silently wondering if you'll embarrass yourself with broth again. You've passed through something. Not a trial, a translation. Breakfast is shared without fanfare. No steward, no song. Just hands offering bowls, spoons dipping quietly, and the gentle sound of people chewing in peace. Your spoon, Ember Bowl, works better than expected. Its awkward shape cradles the stew gently. Its rough edges grip the potatoes. It is somehow perfectly yours. Later that morning, a commotion stirs at the edge of camp. The rider, rest, dramatic. He dismounts badly, then declares that a nearby village has run out of spoons. You blink. Surely that's a metaphor? No, actual spoons. On a flooded kitchen, a collapsed shelf, a poorly timed goat. The Viking chuckles. Nara's eyes go wide. You both know what must be done. You pack quickly. Your spoon roll is tight. Your toolkit ready? Nara slings a pouch over her shoulder and says only, "We ride. You don't ride. You walk briskly. It's better for spoons." The village is small. Gray roofs, bent chimneys, and people with expressions that suggest they're too tired to panic, but not too tired to mourn. Cutlery. You offer to help. They accept. No questions. You set up under the awning of a collapsed bakery. The Viking stands nearby, arms crossed, as if guarding a sacred forge. People bring what they have. Broken ladles, cracked soup paddles, one bent copper dipper that looks like it lost a fight with a stew demon. You and Nara assess. Begin repairs. The work is slow. Yes, delicate. Someone sharpens wood. Someone else scrubs bone. You sand. You polish. You carve a notch in one handle to keep it from rolling off sloped tables. Tiny changes. Big gratitude. A child brings you 2 halves of a snap serving spoon. You bind it together with wire and beeswax. Hand it back. The child gasps. It's better now. You nod. It remembers breaking. That makes it strong. He nods solemnly and walks away like he's just inherited a legacy. By evening, the village has spoons again. Some old, some new, some strange, all usable. You and Nara sit on the bakery steps, covered in wood dust, smelling faintly of soup ghosts. The villagers bring you food, stew, bread, a small cup of something fermented and brave. You eat with ember bowl. You offer Nara the travel spoon. She uses it without hesitation. You're not just companions now. You're a team. That night, before sleep, the Viking sits beside you, says nothing for a while, then mutters, "You fix people when you fix their spoons." You nod. He's not wrong. Then he says something softer. "The first time I stole your spoon, I thought it was funny." You glance over. He's staring at the fire. "No, it would feel wrong." You smile. Say nothing. Some victories don't need salt, just silence. By the time the sun rises again, you've mended 16 spoons, carved 3, and politely retired one that had started to resemble a wooden sock. The villagers offer gifts, mostly food. One person hands you a perfectly round turnip. Another, a ball of goat cheese wrapped in linen. You're honored. You try not to cry. Nara, meanwhile, is cataloging every finished piece in a charcoal ledger titled Borrowed Bowls, a record of useful shapes. You're fairly certain she's founding a religion. The Viking wants to leave by mid-morning. Too much gratitude, he grumbles. You can tell it makes him uncomfortable. Not the thanks, the way it softens him. He walks faster now, talks less. But when he thinks you're not looking, he adjusts the straps on your satchel so the spoons don't rattle. It's the Viking equivalent of a lullaby. You travel inland this time. The path narrows. Fewer camps, fewer goats, more birds, quiet ones. You and Nara walk side by side, trading spoon trivia like gossip. Did you know soup spoons in the Highlands are carved by left-handed monks? Some say the shape of the bowl can reveal your temperament. Someone once ate only stew for 3 years. He was eventually knighted. That one is unverified. You accept it anyway. You stop at a stream. Cool. Pier. Perfect for washing both feet and forks. You all sit, even the Viking. Nara lays out the spoons. One by one. You stare at them. 7 now. each one a chapter. Birch bite, zunk, travel spoon, monk bowl, ember balls, stone gift, patch spoon. You run your fingers over the grain of each and say softly, I don't think I'm afraid of eating anymore. Nara looks over. That's good. You shouldn't be. You nod. No, I mean eating with people. She pauses. Then says, because you've learned the rules? You shake your head. Because I've learned that everyone's just figuring it out, one awkward bite at a time. She smiles. That night, you camp under twisted trees that creak like old doors telling secrets. You build a fire, share dried apples, broth in a dented pot with no handle. You all eat in silence, but it's not empty. It's full of everything you've carried, the bite marks on birch bite, the curve of munkun, the unexpected joy of a lopsided stew scoop. When the stars arrive, the Viking begins to hum. Now, wordless, like something his bones remember. You and Nara don't interrupt. You just listen, and when it ends, he simply says, tomorrow we carve again. You nod, then say without thinking, not for us, for others. He grunts, which might mean fine, or I already assumed that, or possibly, don't make this emotional. Sleep comes easily now. No guilt, no tension, just the soft clink of spoons in your dreams. Like bells from a village where everyone always remembers to stir counterclockwise. Out of respect, you spend the next morning carving in silence. It feels different now. Not a challenge, not a ritual, just a rhythm. Shave, churn, breathe, shave again. The wood smells like something clean and old, like history hiding in plain grain. Nara hums quietly while she works. The Viking sharpens a blade with so much focus, you think he might be mentally debating with the blade itself. You're making spoons for strangers now. Not names, not stories, just hands you haven't met, mouths you'll never hear, and lives that might hold your work for a meal, or a season, or a lifetime. It humbles you. Even Thunk looks impressed. By midday, you've each completed 2. Yours are simple, balanced, Ember Bowl's cousins, perhaps. Nara's are elegant, twisted at the handle like vines. The Vikings are functional. Square edges, deep bowls. No nonsense. He carves with the intensity of a man who once used a spoon to settle an argument. You're not brave enough to ask. You take the spoons to a nearby town known only by its nickname, the place with too many porridges. They live up to it. 8 types. 1 fire, no utensils. Perfect. You offer your work without preamble. The villagers are suspicious, until the eldest, a hunched woman with 1 eyebrow and infinite presence, tests yours. She dips, she tastes, she nods, then says, this spoon knows how to wait. You try not to burst into quiet tears. Nara distributes hers to the children first. They whisper. One of them immediately tries to use the handle as a flute. Progress. The Viking simply places his spoons by the stew pots. People take them wordlessly, because somehow even his cutlery feels like a command. You stay for the meal. You are served 7 porridges. You survive 5. You respectfully decline the 6th. It's blue. The 7th tastes like moss and regret. You eat it anyway, because the spoon works perfectly. Later that evening, as the village prepares for a celebration of something no one seems entirely sure, a man approaches you holding a familiar object, one of your spoons. He says, "I lost my wife last winter. Couldn't eat anything warm since." He lifts the spoon slightly. "But this feels safe." You don't speak. There's nothing to say, just a nod, and a warmth that doesn't come from stew. The celebration begins with music that sounds like rain on bark and ends with a dance involving too much hopping. You don't join, you just watch. You and Nara and the Viking, seated beneath a tree, full of food and a kind of quiet pride. Spoons across your laps, no speeches, just comfort, in the crackling thought that maybe this, all of this, matters more than you ever expected. When the stars rise, someone begins to sing. It's not beautiful, but it's real, and soft, and sleepy. And as you close your eyes, you find yourself hoping that wherever these spoons end up, lost, traded, chewed, broken, a little piece of this night will stay with them. Carried in the wood, held in the curve, stirred into something worth remembering. You leave the place with too many porridges at dawn, slightly swollen with barley, slightly wiser in matters of viscosity. Your satchel feels lighter now, not because you've lost spoons, but because you've shared them. Birch bite, thunk, travel spoon, monk bone, ember bowl, stone gift, patch spoon, and now the two new ones, all still with you. Now you carry their stories more than their weight, and that's easier on the spine. The road forks. The Viking stops, points left, north, river camp, big fish, bigger people, narrow points right, south, hill village, pottery market, weak broth, strong opinions. You shrug, you're not in charge, you just follow the spoons. You split up, temporarily. The Viking heads toward the river with a nod. Someone needs to show them how to chew. Nara walks the other path, notebook ready, mumbling something about ladle curvature and emotional stability. You wave, and you walk the middle path. It's not really a path. It's a suggestion made by grass, but it leads to something strange. Not a town, not a camp, clearing, with a single table, carved from one massive tree trunk, weather-worn, covered in moss, set with plates of nothing. No people, no food, just a place that looks like it's waiting. You sit, because how could you not? You place ember bowl on the table, carefully, like it might wake something. The air is quiet, not silent, just listening. The breeze moves through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a bird coughs, and then footsteps. A woman appears, wrapped in layers that look like blankets made from ideas. She sits across from you, says nothing. You nod. She nods. She pulls out a spoon, flat, bronze, worn so smooth it reflects the sky. She sets it down and waits. You pull out another patch spoon, the one mended with bark thread. She smiles, pulls out a second, ivory, cracked, clearly older than her hands. You lay down, thunk. She lays down a tiny scoop carved from what looks like antler. You continue, like chess, but quieter, and made of history. By the end, 10 spoons sit between you. Not a word spoken, but a conversation fully had. You both lean back. The wind shifts. She gathers hers, wraps them in silk. Stand. Before she leaves, she pauses, places something beside Ember Bowl, then vanishes into the trees. You look down. It's not a spoon. It's a spoon handle. Just the handle, carved with runes you don't recognize, but you feel them, not in your fingers, in your stomach, a kind of understanding without meaning. You tuck it into your satchel, walk back to the road. Meet Nira at sunset, arms full of clay samples and a wild look in her eyes. Did you know some people eat stew backwards, like ingredients first? You nod like you understand. You mostly don't. The Viking returns with a fish the size of your torso and a black eye he refuses to explain. You don't ask. He doesn't offer. Ballads. That night, you share fire with a group of travelers. They're young, messy, but curious. One asks, "What's the best spoon for stew?" You don't answer. You pass them Ember Bowl. They hold it gently, like it's glass, like it knows something. They pause, then say, "This feels kind." You nod. Sometimes that's enough. The next morning, someone tries to trade you a chicken for monk bone. You declined, politely. The chicken looks offended, but you explain. Some spoons aren't just spoons. They're timelines, reminders, little wooden anchors that hold pieces of who you were when you didn't yet know what stew etiquette even meant. The chicken still looks disappointed. You give it a handful of barley and walk away even. You and Nara make your way through hills so soft they feel stitched. Clouds hang low. The air smells of damp grass and long-forgotten recipes. A farmer invites you to lunch. You accept. He serves leek broth with lentils and something he calls yesterday's cabbage. You don't ask questions. You use patch spoon. It doesn't complain. After the meal, the farmer asks what you do. Nara says, "We travel, we teach." We hum, explain spoons. He blinks, then says, "So, monks?" You nod. Sure, close enough. You pass through one more village. Tiny, sleepy, mostly dogs, but they offer you something unexpected. Carving stone, that slate grade, used for sharpening thoughts and spoons alike. You accept. You and Nara take turns running your tools across it, not because they need it, but because the sound, soft, rhythmic, ancient, feels like a lullaby for cutlery. That evening, you camp near a river so still it reflects the moon like a polished ladle. The Viking arrives late. Pays no fish this time, only silence. He sits, he nods. He places a wrapped bundle at your feet. You open it. Inside, a spoon made of 2 woods, one dark, one pale, spliced together with care and thick twine. He says, "It's called twofold." You hold it, heavy, balanced, uncompromising. You say, "Wait." He shrugs. 2 woods, 2 hands, yours and mine. You don't reply. You just place it carefully into your satchel. Now 10. Later, you sit with Nara under a tree that probably predates your ancestors. She sketches by firelight, You polish spoons? Neither of you speaks. You don't need to. Every scrape, every flick of coal, every breath between bites. You've come to know them like punctuation. You look up, ask quietly, "Do you think this ends?" She looks at you, then at the spoons, then says, "I think it continues, just through other hands." You nod, she adds, "but will rest soon." You lean back, feel the tree against your spine. The fire is low, your satchel full, your story nearly told. You wake with the spoons beside you, not clutched, not hidden, just resting. The fire has gone to ash. The wind is soft. The Viking is snoring somewhere nearby, one hand wrapped around his newest project, a ladle that might double as a weapon. Nara sleeps with her notebook open on her chest, the page titled "Spooning Through Time, a Theory." You stretch, you sit, and you realize you're done. Not forever, not entirely, but this chapter, this strange, beautiful, bite-sized chapter of borrowed bowls and quiet victories, it's complete. You unpack the satchel. One by one, you lay them out in front of you, like old friends arriving for a final silent meal. Birch bite, the beginning. Small, bitten, loyal. Funk, heavy, honest, stolen, then returned. Travel spoon, light, quick, curious. Monk bone, elegant, sacred, carried gently. Amber bowl, crooked, yours, forged in fire and broth. Stone gift, dense, symbolic, a silent promise. Hatch boon, mended, remembered, stronger than before. Teaching spoon, practical, worn, passed between palms. Twofold, fused, balanced. A story made of two lives. And the 10th, the handle from the clearing. No bowl, no name, but still, here, you touch each one, not for function, but for memory. Every splinter is a moment. Every curve, a kindness. Every spoon, a sentence in the language of how people come together. Over food, over silence, over shared discomfort and mutual trust. You hear footsteps. The Viking appears first. Grunts, nods at the display, then sits beside you cross-legged like a child, eyes scanning the spoons as if counting old scars. Next comes Nara. She says nothing, just adds one more to the line. A tiny, perfect spoon, carved from cherry wood, the bowl shaped like a teardrop falling sideways. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. "I like round endings." You smile. The three of you sit there for a long time, saying nothing, not out of awkwardness, but because some meals are remembered best in silence. Eventually you stand. Pack the spoons again, not because you need to carry them, but because you know they'll carry you from here to wherever. Warmth, food, and strangers await. You say goodbye to the tree, to the fire pit, to the ground where your feet finally feel steady. As you begin walking, the Viking stops you, holds out his hand. Inside it, a scoop, made of metal, polished, perfect, for when soup gets serious, he says. You take it. Your fingers close around it like they've been waiting. You say, "What's it called?" He grins. "That one? That one's yours." He turned to Nara. She points ahead. not down a road into a forest. One path for the brave, or the bored, or the well-fed. You step forward. The trees greet you with rustles. Somewhere in the branches, something drops. Maybe a leaf, maybe a thought. You keep walking, spoons at your side, stories in your bag. And as the wind brushes past, soft and slow and full of invisible crumbs, you realize it was never just about the spoon. It was about what happens when someone takes it and what you become when you ask for it back. Sleep comes easy tonight. The fire low, your satchel full, and your dreams, they taste like stew and sound like laughter, and end with someone across the fire using your spoon, just for a moment, then offering it back with both hands, and saying, "And this is good?"